Long, dank and drizzly for much of Western England, Wales and Northern Ireland on Saturday, but largely dry and bright across the south and the east, and it will be milder, although it'll still be quite windy on Saturday, and there could be more snow showers in the far north. Sunday continues with strong winds, a little more rain likely across the south, and further wintry showers across the north.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton tonight. A fresh crisis at number 10 this evening as 4 advisors quit within hours of each other. So, is Boris now on the brink, or is this the opportunity for the Prime Minister to reset? I'll have more on a major crisis at Downing Street shortly. Then we'll get expert analysis and insight on whether the PM can survive from The Sun's renowned political columnist Trevor Kavanagh. Before GB News star Mark Dolan gives his uncompromising take. One way Boris could salvage his premiership is by ending the crippling net zero obsession and axing damaging green levies. I'll explain why a failure to ease the cost of living crisis could be what really finishes him off. That's in my digest before I get to my superstar panel's thoughts. Tonight, it's the political commentator and writer Dominique Samuels, the publican and social media sensation Adam Brooks, and broadcaster and author Amy Nicol. Should the face of bias at the BBC, Emily Maitlis, be sacked for continuing to brazenly break its rules on impartiality? She belongs at The Guardian, in my opinion, but 2 former BBC heavyweights, Martin Bell and Robin Aitken, will come out swinging as they debate that in The Clash at 9:20. It's a massive milestone week for the Queen, as Her Majesty celebrates an extraordinary 70 years on the throne. But will the celebrations be dampened by the cloud cast by Andrew, Meghan and Harry? Legendary royal biographer Robert Jobson gives us an insight into how the Queen might mark the momentous occasion at 9:45. As the mild Omicron variant renders COVID as deadly as the flu, is it time we treated it in the same way so we can all get on with our lives? The Chief Executive of Doctoral Medical Services Group, Dr. Charles Levinson, has dedicated his life to tackling flu pandemics, and even he thinks we need to ditch draconian COVID restrictions for good. He's uncancelled at 10:40. Is it time we treated death with the same respect and dignity as life by legalising assisted dying? The incredible journalist and broadcaster Dame Jenny Murray wants people to have a choice after witnessing her own mother suffer, and she'll make her case tonight at 10:20. As we fight for life to get back to normal, is it time we scrapped the legal requirement for infected people to self-isolate immediately? My panel will debate that and more in the Media Buzz. Plus, we're going to have a first look at the newspaper front pages, all of the press. Probably more bad news for Boris on them, I'm afraid. And we'll coronate a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass just before the end of the show. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. But first, breaking tonight, 4 of Boris Johnson's key aides have quit within hours of each other in a number 10 massacre, capping off a stunning day of shock departures that put the PM in probably his most perilous position yet. His principal private secretary, Martin Reynolds, he's the civil service guy responsible for that bring your own booze party invite in May 2020, and number 10 Chief of Staff, Dan Rosenfield, both tendered their resignations this evening. Although it sounds like they jumped before they were pushed. They followed Director of Communications Jack Doyle, who told colleagues that the dramatic past weeks in Downing Street have taken a terrible toll on his family life. And in arguably the most devastating departure, number 10 Policy Chief Munira Mirza, a colleague of Boris for 14 years, stepped down over the PM's Jimmy Savile jibe to Keir Starmer in the Commons on Monday, which she described as scurrilous. Now, you've got to feel for Boris to an extent because he's not even been publicly backed this evening by his own Chancellor, the main rival to take his job, Rishi Sunak, who had this to say when asked about those Savile comments.
Being honest, I wouldn't have said it, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister clarified what he meant.
Make no mistake, this is Downing Street's night of long knives. The question is, how badly maimed is Boris? And where are the staff members loyal to a democratically elected Prime Minister who delivered Brexit and is trying to take us out of this pandemic? So lots to unpick over the next 2 hours, but don't worry. I'm also going to be talking about the cost of living crisis in just a moment in my digest, because to me, that is the issue that really matters today. But first, for more on the story of the day, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
More on Downing Street in just a moment, but first, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak says he hopes the public will be reassured by measures to help take the sting out of rising energy prices. That comes as the cap on how much customers can be charged for energy will increase by 54% from the 1st of April. Let's have a look at the figures. Direct debits for default tariffs are going to hit nearly £700. The price cap on prepayments will go up by more than £2,000. And households in council tax bands A to D will be given £350 to try to ease that burden. And as if that wasn't enough, people are also facing higher mortgages after the Bank of England raises interest rates to 0.5%. They also signalled more hikes are on the way as it tries to curb inflation. It also marks the central bank's first back-to-back increase in interest rates since June 2004. On to those resignations then now, and 4 senior aides to the Prime Minister have resigned tonight, as you've been hearing. Boris Johnson's Chief of Staff, Dan Rosenfield, and Principal Private Secretary Martin Reynolds have both stepped down within the last couple of hours. The head of Number 10's policy unit was first to go. Munira Mirza quit after working with the Prime Minister for 14 years. And then Jack Doyle later on in the day resigned as Director of Communications. GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey sent us this update.
It clearly is quite damaging for Boris Johnson and indeed for Downing Street. It must be said that actually 3 of these were pretty expected to a large degree. We know that Dan Rosenfeld, the Chief of Staff, Martin Reynolds, the Principal Private Secretary, and Jack Doyle, the Director of Communications, were all likely to go, given that they were implicated in some way or another with the Partygate scandal. But be in no doubt that losing these people today means that Boris Johnson is going to have to find people to replace them, and there are questions of whether there will be enough experienced staff to do so. The most interesting and probably the most damaging, though, resignation today was Munira Mirza, who resigned as the head of policy. She had worked for Boris Johnson for a long period of time, did not resign because of the Partygate scandal, but rather because she did not agree with Boris Johnson using that slur against Keir Starmer and Jimmy Savile. And that, in the end, means that this is damaging for Boris Johnson and one that is going to play out in the days to come. The Prime Minister is going to have to react pretty quickly to all of this.
Darren McCaffrey speaking earlier. Well, the resignations didn't just take place in Downing Street either today. Northern Ireland's First Minister Paul Givan stepped down over the post-Brexit agreement. He claimed the Northern Ireland Protocol is destabilising peace between the power-sharing institutions. That comes after an order to stop all checks on agri-food goods coming across the Irish Sea border, which the EU says is a breach of international law. Away from home, the Foreign Secretary has condemned reports that Russia is planning to fabricate an attack on Ukraine to justify military action against it. US intelligence believe Russia could produce propaganda videos showing a staged attack which would give President Putin an excuse to invade. Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, says it's clear and shocking evidence of Russia's unprovoked aggression. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You are with GB News. Now more from Dan Wootton and Tonight.
There may be turmoil in number 10 Downing Street tonight, and Boris Johnson's premiership is clearly on the line. We will be talking about the machinations behind the scenes as the show goes on. But I want to start tonight with what really matters, and that is how on earth we're going to be able to afford to pay our energy bills this year. The cost of living crisis, which I've been warning about for well over a year, is finally starting to bite, and I think will provide the biggest challenge for this government. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, decided to go on a spending spree today rather than solve the crisis with tax cuts, which is what I would have liked to have seen. Scrapping VAT on energy bills is a Boris Brexit promise that should have been delivered, given he called the tax unfair and damaging during the 2016 EU referendum campaign. And these ridiculous green levies, which I'm going to come to in a moment, just have to go. When will the government realise a craven push to net zero is simply too much for struggling families to take? But at least Mr Sunak did something immediate, given Ofgem's record energy price gap rise from £1,278 to £1,971 in April, which, let's be honest, will see some poor folk forced to make the decision between heating and eating. So Sunak's £9 billion package includes a £200 energy rebate for every British household in October, with a further 4 in 5 households covered by an extra £150 in council tax rebates.
Absolutely recognise this is a difficult time. Right? I know this is probably the number one issue on most families' minds. You know, they're looking at the news, they're seeing prices go up, they're worried about the cost of living and in particular energy, and that's why we're taking action. And I really believe that what we're doing, £350, it's a significant amount of money that will make a big difference to the vast majority of households. And I think people, I hope, actually will be reassured by us stepping in to provide that support to ease some of the adjustment that this is.
The optics of him standing at the Downing Street podium tonight, not lost on me. But in the topsy-turvy world of British politics right now, it was Labour advocating for Boris to deliver on his Brexit VAT promise, a decision that has raised the ire of true blue Conservatives like Peter Bone, who correctly reminded the Chancellor this.
Conservatives believe in holding taxes down and putting more money in their people's pockets and so they can decide how to spend it. Socialists believe in raising taxes and then choosing to give it back in the form of discounts and rebates to selected people the government think need it.
But this problem isn't going away, with soaring energy prices expected until the end of 2025. And this is where I fear the government's net zero obsession could drag them down. When will Boris stop listening to Carrie and realise his premiership is at stake over this issue far more than Partygate? When prices were under control, many folk had a little idea of just how much of our energy bills goes on these green taxes. But I want to break it down for you now. A typical bill of just over £1,200 includes £528 on wholesale costs, £268 on network costs, £204 on operating costs, but this is where it gets interesting. £159 on green levies, £61 on VAT, and then that leaves a £23 profit for the energy providers. Just imagine the difference. With the green levies and VAT gone, it would be a conservative solution to this energy crisis. As Tory rebel Steve Baker, a man I greatly respect, put it, once again, they are piling intervention on intervention when we should be a free market conservative government. The levies should be suspended and moved on to general taxation. All the same, Rishi's big spending move was largely greeted with positivity by senior Tory backbenchers.
Many families across the country will struggle with their energy bills this year, so I am grateful that we have a Chancellor who's in touch with that.
But with the Bank of England raising the base interest rate from 0.25% to 0.5% and signalling further rises can be expected because of soaring inflation, I get the feeling today's measures will not be enough to ensure the cost of living crisis doesn't become terminal for the Tories unless more is done to cut the tax burden, and to do that soon. But to respond now, my superstar panel, the political commentator and writer Dominique Samuels, the publican and campaigner Adam Brooks, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicole. So lots of breaking news going on tonight from number 10 Downing Street. But actually, Dominique, it's this cost of living crisis which is what's going to affect ordinary folks' lives.
And it's going to affect ordinary folks' lives for many, many years to come. This
Absolutely.
isn't a short-term problem. This is a problem, as you said, that has been looming for a long time as the government has spent and spent and spent because of the pandemic and because of lockdowns. We're in a situation now where the global economy has virtually collapsed, and it's led to prices skyrocketing. And the issue now is how the government is actually going to help working people. And I completely agree with everything you said. I don't get the green levies. I don't get the rise in national insurance, which the Prime Minister refused to rule out, despite the fact, even specifically now, while the cost of living is rising so astronomically, it doesn't make sense. Loads of businesses are saying they don't want it. So why is the Prime Minister still continuing with it? And even with the VAT, which is supposed to be a benefit of Brexit, it seems the Prime Minister has turned into a socialist, as Peter Bone said, and I'm not sure who it is actually going to help.
And Adam Brooks, it feels like this is all connected to this push for net zero, which we're not ready for at this time, are we?
I was talking to someone earlier. If we're going to tackle environmental issues, let's do it from a position of strength, economic strength, possibly, not when we're down and out or close to down and out. So,
because we are coming out of this extraordinary pandemic when we locked down. I know we think we locked down unnecessarily, but look, we are where we are, aren't we?
Yeah.
The economy has been traumatised.
Yeah. I mean, look, one of my pubs is paying twice as much for electricity at the moment. Small pub, I'm paying £3,000 a month.
And some people have to shut because of that difference.
Yeah, so that's jobs that could be lost from businesses. So it's not just homes, our poorest in the community that are going to get hurt. It's businesses that are going to, and jobs that are going to be lost as well.
You're going to see rising unemployment as well, which...
Exactly, which
Amy, these green levies have to go, don't they?
I've got to completely disagree with you on this, although I will agree with you on VAT, so we're all in agreement on that one.
That's good.
When you look at it, it's less than...
Well, why not the green levies too?
Because if you look at what the green levy actually goes towards, which I wasn't actually that informed about, but I looked around it today, and a lot of it goes towards helping those in lower income households and giving them a boost and helping them to move towards things like having heat energy pumps.
That could come from general taxation, and then it would be fairer as well.
I think the green levies are really, really important and need to stay because we need to go towards being dependent on gas. We need to go towards renewable energy, that is also helping. Last year, British Gas made £112 million in profit. If you want to tax anyone, tax the big companies. We need a windfall tax.
Yeah, this is the Labour view, of course it is.
I mean, 8%.
Businesses.
That would save families 8% if we got rid of the green.
Exactly, is what we need to do. And look, we're going to come back to this issue, but breaking tonight, let me remind you, number 10 Chief of Staff, Dan Rosenfield, Mr Johnson's Principal Private Secretary, Martin Reynolds, Director of Communications, Jack Doyle, and the Policy Chief, Munera Mirza, have all quit number 10 Downing Street today, With me now is the renowned political columnist, one of the most tapped-in journalists in all the country, Trevor Kavanagh. So, Trevor, look, lots to unpack here, but I think the most important question is, was this the decision of the Prime Minister? Is this part of a reset, or has he been ambushed?
I think ambush is the answer here, Dan. This has been a long time coming. They've jumped before they were pushed, of course. But in normal times, the crew go down with the sinking ship. On this occasion, they've deserted it like very carefully timed rats. And they aren't going to be the last. There'll be more to follow, probably tomorrow and in the coming days. And already Rishi Sunak is effectively posturing as the next Prime Minister. It's not any longer if or when. The King is now effectively dead, and it's long live the King. It's King Rishi by all the evidence so far.
So you don't think there's a way for Boris Johnson to survive this, Trevor?
No, I think that the die was cast 2 weeks ago, in my view anyway, and it's just been a matter of watching the whole thing crumble under his feet. No other Prime Minister in history could have withstood for this amount of time the amount of ammunition that's been fired at him and the way that they've detonated bombs under his feet. Dominic Cummings has waged a very skillful war of sabotage here, and it's working. And I don't think there's any way that Boris Johnson can now survive.
Goodness gracious me, because Trevor, you've been a supporter of Boris Johnson, and I know that you wanted his premiership to work. Do you now think it would be for the good of the country if he were to go?
I think yes. I think that the country is now totally divided, but a number of things have developed over the last few days, not least the issue you've just been discussing with the panel, which is the green crap, as they call it. And it's not just the levies, you know, it's not just the 8% that will be saved by getting rid of them. If we took the brave step of actually doing fracking and exploiting the oil under the North Sea, we've got oceans of the stuff, enough to actually to export. So not only would we not pay the levies, we would actually have cheaper oil and gas. Now, I understand the campaign on the environmental side, the green side, but we still are using oil and gas and will be for years to come. What is the point of importing at huge cost when it's sitting there under our feet?
It's madness. It is absolutely madness. I completely agree. And it's a big reason, I think, why Boris's net zero agenda has been a real mistake. Trevor, my big worry here, well, I've got two big worries, and I want you to tackle both of them. The first is that I feel like there's a lot of establishment revenge going on. So much of this Partygate stuff was driven by the left-wing media, you know, the BBC and ITV. So I'm concerned that this is how we start to depose of prime ministers. I don't think it sets a good precedent if that's what happens. The second thing is do we not at least have to give Boris Johnson a chance to take us out of this pandemic?
Well, I think that we've given him a chance, and one of the reasons that we've supported him so strongly, or at least I'm speaking for myself here, is that we could see that there was a conspiracy from the moment that he took over the premiership in the first place among those who never wanted him to become Prime Minister, never wanted Brexit, and who wanted to get us back into the European Union if at all possible. So, yes, and that includes the BBC, and they are literally dancing on his grave before he's buried. So that's why, in many cases, the support for Boris has remained very strong. But I think that in recent times, not just the question of the green issues, the tax rises, the cost of living crisis, but also the inertia in government. I know there's been the pandemic, the COVID pandemic has sucked up all the energy of the government, but it could have done certain things. Certain ministers could have been delegated to start putting into place the things that Boris, in a state of what seems like panic, is now belatedly doing, opening a free port, beginning to talk about deregulation. Had he done these things sooner, I don't think that he would be in this position right now.
I know, so many lost opportunities, Trevor. Look, finally, and I'm certainly not dancing on the grave of Boris Johnson, I feel he needs more time. I really do. But let's say he does lose. a vote of no confidence, assuming the 54 letters do go into the 1922 committee. Is Rishi really the next Prime Minister? Because it's not often, is it, in a Tory leadership contest, and you've been there for many of them, Trevor, it's not often that the favourite ends up winning.
No, but you have to look around at the options. I don't think that Liz Truss has the mettle of a Prime Minister. She may have, but I just don't think so. I don't think any of the other candidates have quite what it takes. You also have on the other side Remainers who will be jostling for position. A lot of people will throw their hats into the ring once the contest begins. In fact, Rishi is the only option. He has been Chancellor for 2 years. But the thing is, we still don't know a lot about what Rishi really believes. Does he believe in green levies? Does he believe in stopping illegal immigration? Does he believe in taking on the European Union, or is he afraid of a trade war as Chancellor and as the Treasury itself is? So he needs to answer a lot of questions. It isn't an automatic plus to change leaders, and it could lead, in the final analysis, to a snap election and Keir Starmer coming in as the leader of a motley crew of coalition parties.
Exactly, with the SNP, and God knows at that point what happens to the union. Trevor Kavanagh, best analysis in the business as ever. Thank you so much. And that's very significant. Trevor Kavanagh saying he thinks it's all over now for Boris Johnson. Trevor, someone who supported Boris for many years. Dominic Samuels, Adam Brooks, Amy Nicol. Do stand by, because we're going to be coming back to you with all of the breaking news on this as the media buzz continues tonight. And of course, on a very turbulent day at number 10 Downing Street, we're also going to have insight and analysis shortly from Mark Dolan as well. He thinks Boris should be replaced by Rishi Sunak, so we'll take his view on that soon. But up next in The Clash, how are we supposed to cover news like today's with a bias-ridden media? The Beeb's Emily Maitlis showed her true colours again recently with some anti-government retweets, and it's not the first time. So should she be forced to go? Former war correspondent Martin Bell and former BBC journalist Robin Aitken go head-to-head after the break, but I want to know what you think on this one. Dan at gbnews.uk, tweet me using the handle at gbnews. We've got a poll running there right now too. See you in a few.
Good evening. The weather's on the change. A much colder feel tomorrow. That colder air arriving as wet and windy weather sweeps south overnight. Cold enough for some ice and snow in places also. It's a cold front swinging south across the country overnight, pushing away the mild air that's been with us for a number of days and introducing the much colder conditions out on the wind tomorrow, and it will feel significantly chillier. There's that weather front bringing rain across northern England and Wales overnight, but some snow likely over the hills of northern England and certainly across the hills and mountains of Wales. Following on, there'll be showers, they'll be wintry, and that could turn things icy as temperatures tumble. Staying pretty mild across East Anglia and the southeast through the night, but here as well and across the Midlands, as the wet weather arrives, there could, for a time, be a little bit of snow in places. Probably not going to last too long, but maybe noticeable for that morning commute before that wet weather swings away. Still icy potentially through the morning across western Scotland and Northern Ireland as the showers keep going here. Snow on the hills, but even to low levels. Some snow possible over Northern England, Northern Ireland, western Scotland. Elsewhere, sunny spells, the odd shower, but a cold feel. Single-digit temperatures. Add on that wind, it feels significantly colder. More wintry showers across northwest England, Northern Ireland, western Scotland on Friday evening before they fade. So again, it could be a little icy. Into the weekends, we're then looking at more wet weather toppling in from the northwest, but bringing milder air back. So although there could be some snow for a time across Scotland, again, not expected to last too long. Dank and drizzly for much of western England, Wales and Northern Ireland on Saturday, but largely dry and bright across the south and the east, and it will be mild, although it'll still be quite windy on Saturday, and there could be more snow showers in the far north. Sunday continues with strong winds, a little more rain likely across the south, and further wintry showers across the north.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Mark Dolan and Jenny Murray on the way, but first it's time for The Clash. The left-wing bias at BBC News is back in the headlines after Newsnight presenter Emily Maitlis was forced into yet another grovelling apology for breaching the broadcaster's impartiality rules. On Monday, Maitlis retweeted the left-leaning independent journalist Anna Isaac's criticism of Brexit, followed by Ramona Rory-Stewart's tweet calling Culture Minister Nadine Dorries' Channel 4 interview share tawdry Trumpian shabbiness. And this is only one of a number of times Maitlis broke her employees' rules. Last February, she shared the clearly controversial Piers Morgan tweet criticising the government's handling of the pandemic. While on 2 other separate occasions, she was reprimanded for her monologues on Dominic Cummings and another on the Prime Minister, who she really doesn't seem to like.
Evening. Dominic Cummings broke the rules. The country can see that, and it shocked the government cannot. But despite the resignation of one minister, growing unease from his backbenchers, a dramatic early warning from the polls, and a deep national disquiet, Boris Johnson has chosen to ignore it. Tonight we consider what this blind loyalty tells us about the workings of Number 10.
I take full responsibility for everything this government has been doing in tackling coronavirus, and I'm very proud of our record.
When it comes to excess deaths, Britain's currently a world leader. Is that really something to be proud of?
Let's not forget that Maitlis is paid out of our money and has a responsibility to be impartial. If she wants to express her far-left views far and wide, she should follow her former colleague and former BBC chief interviewer, really, chief political presenter, certainly a Boris basher, Andrew Marr, into the private sector. Look, there he is in the New Statesman this week saying Boris Johnson should go. Andrew Marr, just weeks ago, was doing all of the main political interviews on a Sunday morning for the BBC. And you wonder why I question the impartiality of this corporation. Now, Director General Tim Davie has already made the bold promise that he would get tough on bias at the Beeb. But if the BBC wants us to believe they take impartiality seriously, they cannot keep treating Ms Maitlis differently because she's one of their biggest stars. At this point, she's actually making Davie's repeated pledges look like a bit of a joke. So, after her latest misstep, should the BBC finally sack Emily Maitlis for repeatedly breaking their biased rules? Email me, dan@gbnews.uk, tweet me at GBNews, and we've got a poll running there too. But first, to duke it out now and help you decide, I'm joined by former BBC correspondent Martin Bell and former BBC journalist and author of Can We Trust the BBC, Robin Aitken. Now, Robin, I absolutely do not believe in cancel culture. I think Emily Maitlis could go and have a brilliant career in the private sector. I'm sure LBC would pay her big bucks. She could do the same thing as Andrew Marr and Eddie Mair and loads of former BBC people who've wanted to express their own views in the private sector. So I have no problem with that. My issue is that right now she is undermining this idea that the BBC is an impartial organisation.
Well, excuse me for laughing, but I have for many years now felt that the BBC's claim to be impartial is just a convenient fiction. I mean, it's laughable. BBC is not impartial. And I think we can all see that. It isn't impartial. It has not been impartial on many of the major issues of the past 20 or 30 years. It wasn't impartial on Brexit. It wasn't impartial on Donald Trump. It wasn't impartial, is not impartial now about Boris Johnson. Impartiality is a fiction. And it's time that the whole idea was jettisoned in favour of a more realistic approach, which would entail real reform at the BBC, because I, for one, would not like to see the BBC destroyed, but I do think that, as presently constituted, it's not fulfilling its bargain with the British public, which is to be impartial.
Yeah.
I mean, it simply isn't.
And I agree with you on all of that. I actually do. But I just want to come specifically, Robin, to this issue of Emily Maitlis, because Tim Davie, when he took the job of Director General, he promised that he was going to enact change. He promised that his presenters were no longer going to be able to express biased views. And he said that if they did, it didn't matter how famous they were, he was going to take action. But Emily Maitlis now, since he's been in the job, has done this time and again, and no action has been taken.
Yeah, no, I completely take your point. And the point about Emily Maitlis is that she's a serial offender. And she has broken the BBC's impartiality rules now on a number of occasions, high-profile occasions. I mean, one thing you left out was the disgraceful interview she did with Rod Liddell, where she...
Oh, I know, yes.
It was described as a drive-by shooting rather than an interview. And she libelled him, called him a racist and all the rest of it. I mean, it was a disgraceful thing to do. The point
and Rod
is
will never forgive her for it.
That the BBC cannot... Tim Davie has said that he wants to reform the BBC. Well, at some point, people who break the impartiality rules have to suffer the consequences. At the moment, what's happening is that Emily Maitlis and some others have broken the rules time and again, and nothing has happened. Now, I am not somebody who would want to see another hack sacked. Look, I don't want Emily Maitlis out of the job. I'm not going to call for her resignation. I'll leave that to politicians, the kind of crappy thing that they do. But what I would say is this, that she has to suffer some pain for breaking the rules. Now, I don't know what that might be, if it's a penalty on her salary, if she's taken off air for 3 months, whatever it is.
Suspend her, exactly. No, I think that's a good idea. Okay,
something which shows that they're taking it seriously.
Exactly, and it would be a deterrent to others. Martin Bell, we've said a lot. I know you disagree. Why are we wrong? Why are we being unfair on Emily Maitlis?
I disagree with every word of it. You do opinion. Eamon Holmes does opinion. It's what you're about. And I think you need the BBC to define yourselves against. So things, I've risked my life for these people. They're widely admired throughout the world. I would like to think, Dan, that you would like to keep the BBC as, if not the gold standard against that you're judged against, but at least as a major broadcaster. They are widely
since you were there, Martin. It's changed. I used to adore the BBC. It's changed.
I've tried to change it. There are things now that I don't like. the second half of the 6 o'clock news in the evening on BBC One goes campaigning. I don't like that. But honestly, we owe them so much. And Dan, if you're allowed to offer, actually, I don't think Emily does offer opinion. She was retweeting something. But if you're allowed to offer opinion, why isn't she? Do you want to be the only opinionated broadcaster on the block?
No. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, Martin. Because she is paid for by us, the taxpayers. And as a fundamental tenet of the BBC, they should keep their opinions to themselves. I mean, I actually say to Andrew Marr, good on him. He was sick of being in that BBC straitjacket. He's gone out to take the coin from the private sector, from the New Statesman and LBC, and now he can express his view and he can express his hatred for Boris Johnson every single week in the New Statesman. Good on him. But it's because she's paid for by us. You must understand that it's such a fundamental difference.
That I try to change the debate. I was there in 10 war zones in my life. And I don't think that on the one hand this, the other hand that is any use anymore. We should not be neutral between armed and the unarmed. And we haven't been. That the thing is changing. I'd like to know, as an eminent broadcaster yourself, whether you think you'd be better off without the BBC. Could you answer that?
I actually believe we would, yeah.
Okay.
I think
well,
I think it should be a subscription service, and then I believe, Martin, it will be accountable to the people who choose to pay for it. I really do fundamentally believe that.
Have you noticed that the major exposures of the things going on in Downing Street have not actually come from the BBC? They've come from Robert Peston and ITV News. I mean, it's not a BBC conspiracy. Could you accept that?
I think it's about how they've covered it. And let me bring Robin in on this, because I would say the BBC have put this Partygate story up to the top of the agenda for weeks and weeks and weeks now. And there is a bias in that, in my opinion, Robin. But do you agree?
Well, I mean, the BBC has been part of a pylon, and it's been out to get Boris ever since he became leader. Now, the BBC hates Boris with a passion. The reason they hate him is because he spearheaded Brexit, and the BBC was root and branch against the idea of Brexit. So, it's of course there's bias. The point is that within BBC newsrooms, you could not raise a cricket team of people who supported the Tories. And you certainly couldn't find many Boris Johnson supporters, I can tell you that. I mean, I'd like to pick up something with Martin, because Martin, many years ago when he was still at the BBC, he formulated this idea of something he called the journalism of attachment. And the journalism of attachment, as I understand the concept, was the idea that journalists out in the field, as he was in Bosnia, would take a moral position and decide which was the right side to support and which was the wrong side. And as it ended up, he was one of those powerful voices which ended up with Britain actually bombing Serbia. Now, I disagreed with that. I felt that it was a quarrel we should not have intervened in that way. The journalism of attachment also led us to attacking Libya, which was a disaster and an ongoing disaster. The journalism of attachment puts reporters in the position of making moral judgments. And I don't think that is the BBC's function.
OK, final word to you, Martin Bell. I'll let you respond to that.
I think it's an outrageous allegation. I was in the line of fire as Mr. Aiken was not. I came to certain conclusions on the grounds of common humanity that we should help other people in desperate situations in desperate countries. And I have no regrets whatever.
OK, fascinating debate. Please come back, both of you. I loved it. That was former BBC correspondent Martin Bell and former BBC journalist and author of Can We Trust the BBC, Robin Aiken. So who do you agree with? Glenn on Twitter says, not a fan of the BBC, but it's doing this to itself. Mateless thinks she's clever, but she's just helping ring the death knell. The BBC is a spent institution. And from Mark, she should have gone ages ago. She is a repeat offender. Nish, meanwhile, tweets in to say, I wouldn't have a problem if Emily did this while working for Sky or ITV, but she can't do it at the BBC. Nish, I agree. That's my point. Go out and take the private money, Emily, and then you can express your opinion. You cannot do it at the BBC. Your verdict is now in. 86% of you agree that the Beeb should sack Emily Maitlis for her continued bias rule breaking. Just 14% of you say they should back her. Fascinating stuff. Up next, as 4 senior aides to the PM quit, how serious is this for Boris Johnson? One man with a sharp eye on the political developments this evening is GBNews star Mark Dolan. He'll join me with the latest straight after the break. Also coming up, it's going to be an emotional weekend for the Queen as she marks 70 years on the throne alongside since the passing of her father. Robert Jobson joins me to explain its importance at 9:45.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Mark Dolan is tonight's outsider. And breaking tonight, number 10 Chief of Staff Dan Rosenfield and Mr Johnson's Principal Private Secretary Martin Reynolds are the latest to have their exit confirmed on a day of turmoil for the embattled Prime Minister. They follow Director of Communications Jack Doyle and Munira Mirza, one of the PM's most loyal and long-standing advisers, who walked out over Boris Johnson's use of a so-called scurrilous Jimmy Savile smear against Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. I don't necessarily agree with that, and I'll talk about that after 10, by the way. But Mark Dolan is here now. Mark, look, lots swirling around this evening, but one of the theories, and it's an educated theory going around, is that once Munira Mirza, who is not known to the public but has been Boris Johnson's loyal lieutenant for the past 14 years, once she quit, Boris Johnson knew that he was in trouble, so he might as well make all of the other moves now. But the problem is, Mark, from a PR perspective, this makes the Prime Minister look like he's embattled 4 senior staff members leaving all at the same time.
That's right. It paints a picture of chaos at the top. It's a really sad day, Dan. I know that both as a broadcaster, a journalist, and a human being, you are incredibly loyal, and I totally hear what you're saying about Boris and backing him. And look, you're a Democrat, as am I. He had that remarkable landslide victory in December 2019 against the odds. He kept Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10. And by God, he got Brexit done. To say we owe this guy a lot is an understatement. But as you mentioned, those 4 departures are significant. Now, Dan Rosenfeld, Martin Reynolds, Jack Doyle, it looks like the Prime Minister has actually cleared them out. And I'd love to have seen the Prime Minister fire more people during his tenure. Why wasn't he able to fire? Well, you've got a good point there. But why didn't he fire Matt Hancock when he made his CCTV sex video, which I'll never unsee? Why couldn't he fire that prize numpty Dominic Cummings over Barnard Castle and that ridiculous soap opera?
He doesn't like doing it, Mark, does he? He doesn't like doing it. He doesn't like letting people down.
I wish he could have. I wish he could have. Now, look, I'm not going to go as far as the great Trevor Kavanagh to say it's game over. He has moved very swiftly to get rid of these 3 particular advisors. And who knows, perhaps this could be the greatest comeback in political history. I've been supportive of Boris since the start because I wanted, as a Remainer, to see Brexit done. But I've got questions, Dan. And if these questions can't be answered quickly, then he is toast. Why are we going for net zero, which nobody voted for? Did he put animals before people in Afghanistan? And was that at the request of his woke wife? Why haven't we had a proper Brexit? Why have we still got that awful Northern Ireland protocol that divides our country down the Irish Sea? Why hasn't he dealt with the migrant crisis? If he has to, fire Priti Patel and give someone the job that will actually deal with it, because it's an ongoing scandal. Why can't he say that only women have a cervix? Dan, you can try to get me pregnant. It might be fun, but you won't be successful. And why is there a booze culture at number 10? So look, the bottom line is that he's on the canvas. The referee is counting to 10, but it's not quite over.
The thing is, Mark, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you that the analysis from Trevor Kavanagh was hugely significant because he is a man highly tapped into what's going on at number 10 Downing Street, and he revealed on the show tonight that he sees there is no way back for Boris Johnson. I don't think we're there yet, Mark. I do want to stay loyal to Boris. I also really worry that we're entering into a world, and by the way, I've seen this happen in Australia, where the mainstream media, usually very liberal, very left-wing, think that if they just keep pressure on prime ministers, they can get rid of them. And it is not their job to do that. And I think Tory MPs have to show a bit of loyalty. At the moment, the polls are coming back. Boris hasn't even been tested electorally yet. I know he has to change, but personally, I just think we need to keep calm and not get rid of the Prime Minister because of one small scandal.
Well, this weekend I was really upset because I read the Sunday papers, and the Mail on Sunday, which you'll agree is a remarkably trustworthy newspaper, had an exclusive on the idea that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, this libertarian, was going to cancel Christmas in England, and that he was bounced out of that decision by a triumvirate, the 3 wise men, if you like, of Jacob Rees-Mogg, Lord Frost and Rishi Sunak. And I'm sorry I flipped, Dan. I'm a human being. I'm an emotional person, and I flipped. And on my show on Sunday night, I said, I'm sorry, that's it, Boris. I've backed you all the way. I've done more positive monologues about Boris Johnson than most people have had hot dinners. But if this guy can't even take credit for keeping England open over Christmas, which was the right thing to do, I just thought that's it. He's just spineless.
I watched
and
it,
I was very disappointed.
And you think Rishi. You think it's Rishi. This is Rishi's time now.
I'd just like to have a grown-up in number 10. I want number 10 to become a centre of government again, not a centre of entertainment and chaos. And I just think that Boris has burned so many bridges, and I think that the risk for the Tories is if he stays too long. And look, the bottom line is he is entitled to be at number 10. He won that majority, so he'll have to go out kicking and screaming. But if he can't change tack, if he can't prove me wrong, Dan, and I'm willing to be proved wrong, then he will not just damage the Conservative Party, but the country too.
Well, Mark Dolan, fascinating analysis. You're going to have a busy weekend, Mark. I'm very jealous, actually, because I hand the breaking news mantle to you. Mark Dolan here, 9 p.m, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. I'm going to be glued, Mark. I'm going to be glued.
Thanks, Dan.
More on the crisis inside number 10. Why are the PM's loyal aides turning on him? My panel will debate what the effect of this mass exodus could be in the media buzz after 10. Plus, we'll see how the newspapers are covering this monumental political story as I give you a first look at tomorrow's front pages. But next, have a catalogue of problems marred a momentous weekend for the Queen as she marks an extraordinary 70 years on the throne. Royal expert Robert Johnson explains its importance and how Her Majesty could celebrate straight after the break.
Good evening. The weather's on the change. A much colder feel tomorrow. That colder air arriving as wet and windy weather sweeps south overnight. Cold enough for some ice and snow in places also. It's a cold front swinging south across the country overnight, pushing away the mild air that's been with us for a number of days and introducing the much colder conditions out on the wind tomorrow, and it will feel significantly chillier. There's that weather front bringing rain across northern England and Wales overnight, but some snow likely over the hills of northern England and certainly across the hills and mountains of Wales. Following on, there'll be showers, they'll be wintry, and that could turn things icy as temperatures tumble. Staying pretty mild across East Anglia and the southeast through the night, but here as well and across the Midlands as the wet weather arrives, there could, for a time, be a little bit of snow in places. Probably not going to last too long, but maybe noticeable for that morning commute before that wet weather swings away. Still icy potentially through the morning across western Scotland and Northern Ireland as the showers keep going here. Snow on the hills, but even to low levels. Some snow possible over northern England, Northern Ireland, western Scotland. Elsewhere, sunny spells, the odd shower, but a cold feel. Single-digit temperatures. Add on that wind, it feels significantly colder. More wintry showers across northwest England, Northern Ireland, western Scotland on Friday evening before they fade. So again, it could be a little icy. Into the weekends, we're then looking at more wet weather, toppling in from the northwest, but bringing milder air back. So although there could be some snow for a time across Scotland, again, not expected to last too long. Dank and drizzly for much of western England, Wales and Northern Ireland on Saturday, but largely dry and bright across the south and the east, and it will be mild, although it'll still be quite windy on Saturday, and there could be more snow showers in the far north. Sunday continues with strong winds, a little more rain likely across the south, and further wintry showers across the north.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Jenny Murray and the newspaper front page is on the way, but it's time now for Crown Jewels with Robert Johnson. This Sunday, massive milestone for the royal family as the Queen marks 70 years since she ascended to the throne. This is the incredible footage showing the moment Her Majesty first stepped foot on British soil as our new sovereign, having gone to bed during a Commonwealth tour in Kenya as a princess and woken up a queen. While euphoric Platinum Jubilee festivities will take place across the nation and beyond in June, this anniversary is set to be an intimate, sombre occasion, as it, of course, also marks the anniversary of the death of the Queen's beloved father, George VI. And it's not just the memories of losing her father that will no doubt taint this incredible milestone, with her favourite son, Prince Andrew, facing a civil sex case, Prince Harry poised to expose family secrets in an explosive memoir, and late husband, Prince Philip, no longer by her side as he was every previous year of her reign. Will the Queen even be in the mood for celebrating? Well, Robert Johnson joins me now. Jobbo, do we have any indication of how the Queen intends to mark what is an incredible milestone this weekend at Sandringham? I believe she's still in Sandringham.
Yeah, she's at Wood Farm. Obviously, it's a time of reflection, really, for the Queen. It's, of course, where Prince Philip spent a lot of his retirement, and also Sandringham Estate, of course, where her father, George VI, died at just 56 all those years ago, and 52. So, it's not going to be a moment for celebration. It's a time of reflection, but she will mark the occasion, I understand. There's going to be, there may well be a picture released, I think, and there may be a statement, but we'll have to wait and see from her. But I would have thought it's more of an acknowledgement of the time that she's been on the throne rather than making a statement about what she's doing next or anything like that. And we know she's not been that well. She lost a bit of weight and she's been a bit poorly, but she's back and fairly active again, and she's preparing herself for what will be the Jubilee celebrations, which will be in June, which is between the 2nd and the 5th of June. And I'm personally hoping that she's back on form for one of the highlights will be going to the Derby. I think she'll have a horse racing there, and hopefully she'll get a winner for the first time ever in her reign.
Jobbo, we will never see her like again, will we?
No, never again. I don't think we'll ever have anyone on the throne as long as her as well. Well, I mean, she's overseen really amazing times. The transition from really what was an Edwardian institution and a sort of post-Empire age when she came to the throne. I remember the British Empire was just beginning to sort of dismantle after the Second World War, and she's managed to rebuild with the Commonwealth and her leadership in the Commonwealth that connection that we still have with a lot of those 54 nations around the globe, of which she's queen of a handful too. So I do think that we are going to see changes after she passes, with the Prince of Wales as the king and Camilla as queen consort. I think that there'll be a smaller, probably less significant monarchy. But in terms of her, she came to the throne at just in her mid-20s. Are we ever going to see somebody who's reigned as long as this? I very much doubt it. And someone, who's really been an incredibly special person in terms of her calmness, her continuity. And we even look back to the pandemic, Dan, when she made her statement and calmed everyone down. When everyone was getting a little bit hysterical, she came out with that statement and just, we'll meet again. And she absolutely was right.
No, you're giving me goosebumps, Jobbo. What a reign it has been. We'll speak again next week.
Thanks, Dan.
It's 10 p.m. This is Dan Wootton Tonight, and breaking tonight. The government has been left shell-shocked as 4 key aides to Boris Johnson quit within hours of each other, potentially some before they were pushed. So is this big trouble for the PM, or Operation Big Dog, his chance to fight back? I'll debate with my panel, plus we'll see how the newspapers are covering the Downing Street exodus as we reveal the first front pages next. As the mild Omicron variant renders COVID as deadly as the flu, is it time we treated it in the same way? Dr. Charles Levinson, Chief Executive of Doctoral Medical Services Group, has dedicated his life to tackling flu pandemics and believes now is the time for us to return to normality. He's uncancelled at 10:40. Plus, is it time we treated death with the same respect and dignity as life by legalising assisted dying? Broadcasting legend Dame Jenny Murray wants people to have a choice after witnessing her own mother suffer. She makes an impassioned plea that I hope policymakers everywhere listen to at 10:20. Is it time we scrap the legal requirement for infected people to self-isolate immediately? And as a nation that suffered 2 years of scaremongering, ready to even entertain such a notion? I'll get the thoughts of my panel and the media buzz at 10:30. And in a very busy hour before the end of the show, I'll coronate a brand new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Just one thing first, though. A note to anyone who has swallowed the spin and seen headlines far and wide today that the dear leader of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, a socialist queen who is so kind and must not be questioned, has opened the country's borders for the first time in nearly 2 years. That's rubbish, by the way. Her 5-step so-called reopening plan will still require vaccinated passport holders to self-isolate for 10 days, an impossible prospect for someone with a job like me, given the trip to the other side of the world will already take close to 2 days door to door. The unvaccinated, by the way, will still be forced into government-run quarantine for 14 days at a terrifying-sounding new national quarantine service. And borders not planned to open to non-New Zealand passport holders until October. How utterly ridiculous. Ardern only made the move after being shamed by the brave former Al Jazeera journalist Charlotte Ballas, New Zealand passport holder who found herself given refuge by the Taliban in Afghanistan when her own country rejected her. Meanwhile, Ardern said at a grand press conference that reopening doesn't mean a return to life before COVID.
It's part of moving forward, but that doesn't mean a return to life before COVID, when we can be better than that.
No, you odd human being. Do you not understand? We just want to return to normal. What are you talking about? And on a personal level, and I know many of you know that I've been going through this, I just want to be reunited with my mum and my sister and my dad, who I haven't seen now for over 2 years. I'm mentioning that, by the way, for a bit of a selfish reason, because it is my amazing dad, John's birthday today. He's a school principal in Wellington, New Zealand. I haven't seen him for over 2 years. I miss him so much, and I pray, Dad, that I will be able to see you very soon. All the breaking news on the Downing Street crisis in just a moment. But first, the headlines at 10 with Polly Middlehurst.
Many thanks, Dan, and happy birthday, Dan's dad. I'm Polly Middlehurst, even from the GB newsroom. So, the top story tonight, 4 senior aides to the Prime Minister have resigned. Boris Johnson's Chief of Staff, Dan Rosenfield, and Principal Private Secretary Martin Reynolds have both stepped down this evening. Earlier, Jack Doyle resigned as Director of Communications, and Munira Mirza, who worked for the PM for 14 years, also quit first thing this morning. GB News' political editor Darren McCaffrey sent this from Blackpool.
3 of these were pretty expected to a large degree. We know that Dan Rosenfeld, the Chief of Staff, Martin Reynolds, the Principal Private Secretary, and Jack Doyle, the Director of Communications, were all likely to go, given that they were implicated in some way or another with the Partygate scandal. But be in no doubt that losing these people today means that Boris Johnson is going to have to find people to replace them, and there are questions of whether there will be enough experienced staff to do so. The most interesting and probably the most damaging, though, resignation today was Munira Mirza, who resigned as the head of policy. She had worked for Boris Johnson for a long period of time, did not resign because of the Partygate scandal, but rather because she did not agree with Boris Johnson using that slur against Keir Starmer and Jimmy Savile. And that, in the end, means that this is damaging for Boris Johnson.
Darren McCaffrey. Well, the other top story today, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak says he hopes the public will be reassured by measures to help take the sting out of the rising energy prices. It's as the energy price cap is set to increase by 54% from the 1st of April. That means direct debits for default tariffs will hit nearly £700. The price cap on prepayments will go up by more than £2,000. Households in council tax bands aided D will be given £350 to ease the burden. This from Rishi Sunak.
Our plan is right. It is fair. And I hope it will help ease the anxiety that millions of people feel about rising energy costs by sharing the burden between us all.
Rishi Sunak. Well, people are also facing higher mortgages after the Bank of England raised interest rates 0.5%. They also signalled more hikes are on the way as the bank tries to curb inflation. And it marks the central bank's first back-to-back increase since June 2004. Not only resignations in Downing Street tonight, Northern Ireland's First Minister Paul Gavin stepped down over the post-Brexit agreement. He claims the Northern Ireland Protocol is destabilising peace between the power-sharing institutions. It comes after an order to stop all checks on agri-food goods coming across the Irish Sea border, which the EU says is a breach of international law. The Foreign Secretary today condemned reports that Russia is planning to fabricate an attack on Ukraine to possibly justify military action against it. US intelligence believe Russia could produce propaganda videos showing a staged attack, which would then give President Putin an excuse to invade. Well, Liz Truss says it's clear and shocking evidence of Russia's unprovoked aggression. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Dan Wootton and Tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight, now on our Media Buzz. First front pages are in, and the Metro, this is a very dramatic front page. Perfect storm, they report. The Chancellor unveiled a £9 billion rescue package to help 22 million households with gas and electricity bills, reaching an average of almost £2,000 in April. But it comes at the same time as the national insurance tax hike. Of course, as well, Perfect Storm 2, they say party's over as for quit number 10. The big squeeze is the Daily Telegraph's headline. Senior cabinet ministers believe there should be a rethink of the government's net zero plans as the country faces the biggest cost of living crisis in a generation. Several ministers have expressed concern that the pace of the planned switch to renewable energy is too fast and increasing costs for consumers, which is, of course, exactly what I said in my digest earlier this evening. My superstar panel back with me now, political commentator and writer Dominique Samuels, the publican and social media sensation Adam Brooks, and the broadcaster and author Amy Nicole. Now, as we just saw, they're breaking tonight more turmoil for Boris Johnson after 4 key aides quit their role within hours of each other. Among them, Principal Private Secretary Martin Reynolds. Now, he's the civil servant responsible for that very unfortunate bring your own booze party invite in May 2020, which, of course, quite rightly fueled the outrage over Partygate. In an update, though, it's been reported that Martin will actually return to his previous department, the Foreign Office. Isn't that insane? They just look after themselves in the Westminster bubble, don't they? Chief of Staff Dan Rosenfield also quit this evening after Jack Doyle stepped down as Director of Communications for Number 10, reportedly citing the terrible toll the last few weeks in Downing Street had taken on his family life. However, he insisted he had always planned to leave the role after 2 years. Number 10 Policy Chief Munira Mirza, a highly respected operative and colleague of the Prime Minister's for 14 years. Actually, she's one of 5 women that Boris Johnson said he respected most in the world. She was the first and arguably most gutting resignation of the day for the PM. She announced her departure over his Jimmy Savile jibe at Keir Starmer. Boris accused the Labour leader, you might remember, who was formerly Director of Public Prosecutions, of failing to take down the BBC star, paedophile and serial sex abuser during their Commons showdown in the wake of the Sue Gray report on Monday.
They will be judged by the decisions they take now.
Instead, Mr. Speaker, this leader of the opposition, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Speaker, so he spent most of his time prosecuting journalists and failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile, as far as I can make out, Mr. Speaker.
Despite Boris explaining he was making a point about Starmer's responsibility for the Crown Prosecution Service as a whole, Starmer was leading the CPS when they advised the police there was insufficient evidence to prosecute Savile in 2009, but did not have personal involvement in any of that decision-making. Despite all of that, it wasn't good enough for Mirza. In a damning letter, she wrote, This was not the normal cut and thrust of politics. It was an inappropriate and partisan reference to a horrendous case of child sex abuse. You tried to clarify your position today, but despite my urging, you did not apologise for the misleading impression you gave. It is not too late for you, but I'm sorry to say it is too late for me. Boris seemed to be feeling the pain of her departure in quite a spiky interview with Channel 5 News tonight.
People keep going on about this. No one is commenting, at least of all me, about the personal involvement of the Leader of the Opposition in the handling of that case.
But that's exactly what you were doing, and clearly it was too much for Munira Mirza.
All that I've said is that the Leader of the Opposition apologised for the CPS's handling of that issue during his tenure. And that's all, frankly, that needs to be said. I'm sorry to lose Munira. She's done an outstanding job. She's been a wonderful colleague for a long time, and she has been instrumental in delivering all sorts of fantastic policies in London and now in the government of the UK. And
she called it an inappropriate and partisan reference to a case of child sex abuse that you had brought up.
Well, I don't agree with that.
So, as I've been saying for the past 2 weeks, there is now a coordinated effort by the establishment, by the broadcast media, by Ramona's, by the Blob, to get Boris out. They want him out. Adam Brooks, I want to come to you first, because I think you're with me on this, that actually what Boris said about Jimmy Savile and Keir Starmer is factually true, because he was running the CPS at the time.
Amy, Keir Starmer apologised for the failings of the CPS under himself in that case in 2013.
Oh.
Why would he apologise?
And we're also
Stop moulding yourself into shapes to fit
because
the
Amy,
space. This is embarrassing.
No, because Amy, all I'm saying is that we have to look at the facts. And people are saying that Boris Johnson should be responsible for lots of parties that were going on at number 10 Downing Street that he had no idea about.
Really, Dan? You don't think he had any idea?
I think he had an idea about a lot of the parties.
What, and you don't think Keir Starmer had an idea what was going on beneath him in the CPS?
Based upon the facts, he had no personal...
No, but he's the head of the CPS. He's the head of the CPS. He's the head of the...
Stockholm syndrome. But it says there that he had no personal involvement in that decision-making, and a number of times, as is said in the Super
But the organisation that he heads
Boris knew about what was going on. His private undersecretary was involved in the bring your own
the other point that's very personal to me is Keir Starmer. Boris Johnson is completely right to say Keir Starmer at that time was going after journalists, which I will never forget, actually, and it was a despicable thing that the CPS did at the time. So all I'm saying is that I'm surprised that this one comment has turned into such a palaver.
I don't think he should have said it. I'm going to... Let's be clear. I don't think it was very well judged.
Yeah, because it's not sensible, is it? He's created more trouble for himself.
Yeah, it's just another thing.
Who advised him to say it, Dan? PMs don't do everything themselves. Who advised him that that was a good idea?
That line came from somewhere.
It come from someone.
Amy, why are you so shocked? Why have I got this so horrendously wrong? Go on.
I just don't think we
say.
need to focus on that tiny little thing. That it's like, stop defending him now. Stop defending him now. Enough has happened. We have said before, this is just another thing to add to the list. I think there are now 312, so now 313 lies that Boris Johnson has told. And soon I think it's just going to be Nadine, Rees-Mogg and Boris wheeling that suitcase into Co-op. Because there's none left.
I just want to clarify my position, because I think it's very important, Amy. You know, you're saying I'm defending him. You have been on this sofa with me time and again, and in my previous roles, and you've been there with Adam too, when we have criticised Boris for the actions that he took over the course of this pandemic, and I never defended those parties going on at number 10 Downing Street. But this is about whether these actions reach the threshold to depose a Prime Minister elected with an 80-seat majority.
Of course they do. I feel like you're a frog that's only just realising it's in boiling water. We're in a lot of trouble. This PM is not fit for office.
But you didn't want him. You're a Ramona left-winger. You never wanted him in there.
I wouldn't put myself completely in that category.
Dan, do we believe that this is her true excuse to leave?
No, I don't think so. Exactly.
You know, come on.
I
actually think it is, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, Dominique. This is a good woman, Munira Mirza. I have a lot of respect for her. I have a lot of respect for the things that she's said in the past. And she's been there for Boris for a long time. So I think what happened is this was a genuine resignation from Munira. And then he felt that he wanted to claim back the agenda by getting rid of everyone who he needed to get rid of.
That's what I was thinking as well, because her resignation does seem very separate from the other three. Theirs seemed quite inevitable, like they were going anyway, and I think he kind of got in front of it before.
Is there a few fixed penalty notices coming the other's way?
I have a feeling the other three blokes who have gone neck deep in the Partygate scandal. But let's be honest, Boris Johnson himself is neck deep in it too, and Gary Johnson is neck deep in it too. So, Dominic, from a political perspective, is it not very risky for Boris Johnson to accept the resignation of these three men when he might also find himself in trouble with the police over Partygate?
I suppose so, but the argument that he's tried to paint anyway is that it's important to have a culture change within Number 10. You know, it needs to be organised. He needs to be back in control, because the narrative was that he clearly isn't in control of what's going on. So it could easily be he's accepted those resignations in a way of saying, look, we are actually clearing house. We're going to change the culture here. Therefore, I actually don't need to resign. So it could actually work in his favour.
In my opinion, he looked quite upbeat in that last interview that, like, GB News played.
Yeah, he didn't look. Great liar.
He didn't look despondent.
What
He
an
didn't look
actor.
broken.
Let's face it.
He's got to keep going. He's got to keep going. And there's a lot of people out there who want Boris Johnson to be given another chance, who want Boris Johnson to be able to lead us out of this pandemic, and who do not want to give in to the establishment, to the BBC, to ITV, to Sky News, who have wanted this democratically elected Prime Minister gone for a long time. That's all I'm saying. That is not defending Boris Johnson, Amy. I've been very critical of many things he's done. I just think we all need to take a breather.
It looks like a coup, doesn't it?
It does.
Dan?
It really does. Now, Amy, you mentioned Nadine Dorries. I mean, the left-wingers just cannot get over their hatred of Nadine Dorries. It's completely bizarre
It's
to
the gift
me.
that keeps on giving.
And she's gone viral this week for her unfettered defence of Boris Johnson. I say good on her for that. He obviously needs all the allies he can get. But have you seen this video ribbing the Culture Secretary for her devotion to the PM based off an incredibly timed... Very good, whoever's behind that. I do salute you. But it's not the only clip Dorries has inspired. As part of the government's Operation Red Meat fight back, the Cabinet Minister has gone to war with the BBC by threatening to abolish the licence fee after announcing a freeze for the next 2 years. But check this out. The corporation has now fought back.
But here's the thing. The BBC doesn't have to be here. It only exists if we really believe it matters. We're in it together, aren't we? Let's do this.
Come here.
The BBC.
It's something that belongs to all of us. Every one of us.
Every one of us.
They're right about one thing. The BBC doesn't have to be here. But what are these lot playing at? Essentially launching a propaganda campaign. The BBC needs to start accepting what the government says about the urgent need for reform rather than burying its head in the sand and whipping up anger from its devout army of Twitter liberals. It's about time we let the people decide whether they want to pay for their left-wing bias or not. Dominic Samuels, Adam Brooks, Amy Nicole, thank you so much. Coming up, it's a vital step if we're going to reclaim normality. So why are we still dragging our feet on letting infected people escape self-isolation? I'll debate that with my panel in the Media Buzz at 10:30. Plus, your first look at more of the newspapers Boris Johnson will probably be dreading after tonight's Downing Street exodus. But next, should assisted dying be legalised? Well, broadcasting legend Dame Jenny Murray passionately believes it should after watching her mother's heartbreaking ordeal with Parkinson's. It's an important discussion that needs to be had, and it's coming up right after this.
Good evening. The weather's on the change. A much colder feel tomorrow. That colder air arriving as wet and windy weather sweeps south overnight. Cold enough for some ice and snow in places also. It's a cold front swinging south across the country overnight, pushing away the mild air that's been with us for a number of days and introducing the much colder conditions out on the wind tomorrow, and it will feel significantly chillier. There's that weather front bringing rain across northern England and Wales overnight, but some snow likely over the hills of northern England and certainly across the hills and mountains of Wales. Following on, there'll be showers, they'll be wintry, and that could turn things icy as temperatures tumble. Staying pretty mild across East Anglia and the southeast through the night, but here as well and across the Midlands, as the wet weather arrives, there could, for a time, be a little bit of snow in places. Probably not going to last too long, but maybe noticeable for that morning commute before that wet weather swings away. Still icy potentially through the morning across western Scotland and Northern Ireland as the showers keep going here. Snow on the hills, but even to low levels. Some snow possible over Northern England, Northern Ireland, western Scotland. Elsewhere, sunny spells, the odd shower, but a cold feel. Single-digit temperatures. Add on that wind, it feels significantly colder. More wintry showers across northwest England, Northern Ireland, western Scotland on Friday evening before they fade. So again, it could be a little icy. Into the weekends, we're then looking at more wet weather, toppling in from the northwest, but bringing milder air back. So although there could be some snow for a time across Scotland, again, not expected to last too long. Dank and drizzly for much of Western England, Wales and Northern Ireland on Saturday, but largely dry and bright across the south and the east, and it will be mild, although it'll still be quite windy on Saturday, and there could be more snow showers in the far north. Sunday continues with strong winds, a little more rain likely across the south, and further wintry showers across the north.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And we're back. Tomorrow's newspaper front page is coming up. But first, is it time we afforded the same respect and dignity to death that we do to life by legalising assisted dying? My next guest, the incredible journalist and broadcaster Dame Jenny Murray, knows from her own painful experience the suffering that could be saved if people were given the right to die on their own terms. Jenny was helpless when Parkinson's disease slowly took everything away from her mother. And there was nothing she could do except wait for her to be at peace. She has spoken of the shame and heartbreak of being forced to deny her frail mother's pleas to die, which actually inspired Jenny and her two closest friends to make a pact. They agreed that if any of them ended up in that situation, they would find a way of assisting suicide so they could have a humane death in the company of a supportive family and friends, and at a time of their choosing. Now, Jenny has become a prominent advocate of assisted dying, and is supporting a House of Lords bill that says it should be legal for a person judged to have 6 months to live to get help to die with the approval of 2 doctors and a judge. The bill's frustratingly slow passage prompted Jenny to make an ITV documentary, which airs on the 10th of February. And I'm delighted to say she joins me ahead of that documentary tonight. And Jenny wrote another very powerful column about this issue in today's Daily Mail. I'm with you. I am with you. The problem is a law like this also creates such a moral quagmire, doesn't it? Which is why I think the politicians are reluctant to go there.
I know some people consider it a moral quagmire. I don't. And what you have to remember is that suicide and assisted death are two completely different things. Totally. If somebody commits suicide, kills themselves, whatever the terminology is, that is generally because they're actually at that time not in full control of their faculties. But what we're talking about with assisted death is you're someone who has a terminal disease, you're in the most frightful pain, and you are in your right mind. You make the decision that now is the time to go. And I absolutely firmly believe that you should have the right to make that choice.
And the terrible thing is at the moment that we're putting these family members in the position of potentially breaking the law. I mean, we've all seen the stories of the grieving relatives who the police have to end up arresting.
Well, what you know, for the documentary, obviously I've talked to people who are opposed. Baroness Tanny Gray-Thompson is one of them. She's disabled, so her concern is that people who have disabilities will be made to feel that their lives are not worth living. So all of those concerns are with her. There are people who have religious concerns about it. But at the same time, I've interviewed, for the second time, actually, I interviewed her for Woman's Hour nearly 20 years ago. Her name is Wyn Crew, and her husband, Reg Crew, was the first British person to be named as someone who went to Dignitas. And we've used a little bit of the film that was made of them then, all those years ago, where he had motor neurone disease, he had no movement in any part of his body, he couldn't even hold his head up. The last faculty he had left was his voice and the ability to swallow. So he desperately needed to get there quickly so that he could voice his agreement to taking the barbiturates and be able to swallow them. Now, nearly 20 years on, Wyn is now 90. She's the sparkiest 90-year-old I think I've ever come across in my life. And she says now, you know, I promised Reg that I would campaign, because some of the last words he said to me was, I shouldn't have had to come here for this. I should have been able to do this at home. And she has spent all these years campaigning for the law to be changed. She was interviewed by the police, but they realised that, you know, number one, she hadn't actually given him the drugs. A nurse had done that. And they were very sympathetic to the plight that her husband had been in. But she's campaigned and campaigned and campaigned for everyone to have the right to choose to die if they want to. The other very interesting person I've spoken to for the documentary is an American doctor in California, because California, you know, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, so many countries have legalised this. Not all the American states have, but California has. And she is a doctor who does give the drugs to people who need them. It's a very similar law there to the one that's proposed by Baroness Meacher here. And one of the really interesting things she said was, you know, in so many cases she has prescribed the barbiturates, she's given them to the patient, and in a high number of cases they haven't actually taken them, even though they are terminally ill, they're in pain, they finding life very difficult, but they have that choice. They can make the choice. They can either, there is the stuff, if they say this is too much, I can't bear it any longer, they can take those drugs, and quite a number of them don't.
Now, Jeannie, I was really struck by the column that you wrote last year about, well, it was headlined, Why I Have a Right to Die Pact with Two of My Best Friends. And I'm just going to read just a little bit of it, because You say, we were in our mid-50s at the time, and none of us could bear the thought of ending our lives in such a prolonged and agonising way. We agreed that were any of us to end up in such a situation, we would help. We didn't want to put our husbands or children into the position I had been in. And you say the three of us still talk about your plan every time a move towards the legalisation of assisted dying is proposed and rejected. As we're all in our 70s, the trust we place in each other becomes increasingly important and setting our minds at rest that we would not have to suffer unnecessarily. So this wasn't something that you discussed casually. You know, you're very serious that you want to have this right, and your two friends want to have the right too.
I think so many people who have witnessed somebody dying, somebody they love, going through the nightmare that my mother, particularly my father, also went through the nightmare, and he actually did, 6 months after my mother died, he did try to take his own life. He stopped eating and drinking. Luckily, I found him. Dehydrated, starving. I managed to persuade him into hospital. He didn't want to go to hospital, he wanted to die at home, but he went to hospital, was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer, and I luckily got him a bed in a hospice where, of course, he had the very best of palliative care. Couldn't have been better. He was there for 2 weeks. He died in my arms with somebody who loved him. So when you say I don't want to put the burden on my husband, my children, who are now, of course, very grown up, that's true. I don't want them involved in having to make the decision. The decision is mine, and it's very useful to have my friends being supportive, if necessary, helping us to go to Dignitas if that becomes necessary, if the law doesn't change. But what I would want is to be in the position my mother was in, have the choice to take the drugs, because she was perfectly in her sound mind, and have her family around her. My father had me with him when he died because he'd been given good palliative care. My mother didn't have that. She just died all by herself.
No, well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's very powerful. I completely agree with you that it's when you see someone in those dying days. For me, it wasn't a relative, but it was someone who my family is very close to, and I'll never forget seeing him in those final days. And it did crystallise my thinking on this issue, and it's why I agree with you now. I appreciate it's controversial. I appreciate that there are the religious issues, and it could be
I think it's less and
misused,
less controversial. You know, up to 80% of the British population are in favour of it. And one of the things Wing Cruz said, she said, you know, so many people are in favour of that. They get it. Why don't we have a referendum? Put it to the people, she said. And maybe on this question, she's right.
Which they have done in other countries, by the way. And I think you're right. I did say after Brexit, never again.
No
but
more
actually,
referendum. But
on an issue
one,
like this,
think,
which is much more about morality, I think you're probably right. Dame Jenny Murray, thank you so much for sharing that story. It was great to have you back. Coming up, as the mild Omicron variant renders COVID as deadly as the flu, is it time we started to treat it in the same way so that we can get on with our lives? Well, Dr. Charles Levinson has dedicated his life to tackling flu pandemics, and he thinks we're finally there. He'll be uncancelled shortly. But first, I don't normally praise the wokies at Bafta, but at least we're in agreement about this toxic little movie that desecrates Princess Diana's memory.
I really like things that are simple, ordinary. Or things that are real.
My verdict on this year's BAFTA nominations coming up in just a moment. Plus, I'll reveal how more of the newspapers are covering tonight's mass Downing Street exit and the Prime Minister's perilous situation. Back soon.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now on Our Media Buzz. Lots of front pages just in. Ouch, says The Sun. Families will be an average of £2,417 worse off this year, despite a £9 billion bailout announced by the Chancellor. Inside the paper, Rishi Sunak writes, "Throughout my time as Chancellor, I have always tried to come at problems in a fair way and with the humility that I can't always do everything for everyone." I wonder who that might be aimed at. The Guardian, citing Munira Mirz's stinging criticism of the PM and saying the Partygate scandal continues to shake his hold on government. All the other three aides who resigned, reports the paper, have been implicated in Downing Street's response to lockdown parties. Meltdown on Downing Street is the Daily Mail headline. The publication says, "Will the last one to leave please turn out the lights?" The Mirror reports, "They're all laughing," referring to the Treasury following the Chancellor's statement earlier today. Worst financial squeeze in 30 years, energy prices up £700 and national insurance rise still set to come. But it appears that is the least of their concern. Britain's facing biggest drop in living standards, leads the Times, as energy bills rise by £700 and the Bank of England increases interest rates. And of course, Boris features on the front page as they report that doubts surrounding the PM grow as Rishi Sunak takes a swipe. Sunak, tipped to be his successor if Boris is forced out, distanced himself further from Boris as he rebuked him for his claims that Starmer failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile. And the Daily Star, never following the herd, zeroes in on hackers who targeted knickknacks, hula hoops and KP nuts, meaning there was a shortage of the snacks. "Give us all your money or the knickknacks get it," they declare. I have to say, knickknacks, oh, I love them.
Same.
I'm spicy tonight.
I love them.
My superstar panel back now. Dominic saying she's a knick-knack girl. Adam Brooks here too, and Amy Nicole. At last, the framework of COVID control, which has impinged our freedom for 2 long years, is slowly being dismantled piece by piece. The legal requirement for infected people to self-isolate is set to expire on March the 24th, and Boris Johnson announced last month that it won't be renewed, hopefully, as guidance is introduced in its place. It will probably take some time getting used to symptomatic and asymptomatic people being out and about, but it's a vital step if we're going to reclaim normality. So what are they waiting for? It should all be ditched immediately, I say, along with your neurotic testing and £10,000 fines. Please let us live once again without the worry of being locked in our home because we have the sniffles, or in most cases, no symptoms of any illness at all. Even people inside the NHS have accepted that this perverse imprisonment of healthy people can no longer be justified. As Dr. Renee Hodenkamp writes in the Daily Mail today, the system created to protect us is now enslaving us. She wrote, "Although most people who contract COVID these days don't get sick, they are having to behave as if they are, retreating behind their front doors for a week, sometimes more. Of course, we must still do our utmost to safeguard the vulnerable, and we owe it to them to remain vigilant and be sensible. But the reality is that we cannot continue to put healthy adults and children under house arrest for a mild illness similar to any other common respiratory infection. Now is the moment to forget about testing and quarantine and reclaim our pre-COVID lives. Amy Nicole, we've just got to get on with this, don't we?
I don't think we can get on with it, though, because we need to acknowledge the reality. The reality is that we're living with COVID, and if you say we need to get back to normality, then you're completely disregarding 500,000 vulnerable people, because you talk about like health apartheid when it comes to other issues, but with this one, if we say we're not going to test, then this puts the vulnerable in a really, really tricky
How did
position.
we used to deal with those people with the winter flu?
We didn't have COVID. The winter flu wasn't as prevalent and as transmissible as COVID.
Have you
it's
had a
completely
look
different.
at the infection fatality rate?
It's a completely different issue.
We're about to talk about it. Yeah, we're about to talk about it in a moment. Adam Brooks, do you say let's just scrap this now?
Of course. I mean, Dr. Renee is a good friend of mine. I agree with everything she's put in her article today. It's a very good article. And, I mean, the average age of a COVID death is still 82.
Mm-hmm.
So come on, you know, we must move on. And there's 67 other million people in this country that we've got to think about. There's jobs and livelihoods.
Yeah, and Dominique, isn't it also just about putting the power back on the people to make sensible decisions for ourselves? Because we've been mollycoddled as a society over the past 22 months. And I actually think that's a really bad thing, because as human beings, we make a decision. What are our symptoms like?
Yep.
Are we going to put other people at risk? And you make the sensible judgment whether to stay home or not. It shouldn't be enshrined in law.
Yeah, exactly. We seem to have sort of forced people into hypochondriacs, and I don't say that lightly. I think we are encouraging a really bizarre form of hypochondria here, because what we used to do back in the day, if you were so ill that you couldn't go into work very clearly, you were bedridden, you just wouldn't go in. If you had a slight cough, slight sneeze, you'd still go into work because you'd be expected to. You wouldn't be classed as seriously ill. So why can't we do the same for COVID? It's time to move on now.
I think Amy Nicole's going to be in her full PPE and mask in 10 years' time.
Whatever it takes.
Now, the late, great Princess Diana has really been done a disservice by the world of TV and film in the past 12 months. Hot on the heels of that revolting and offensive Diana the Musical on Netflix came the tacky, and I have to be honest with you, deathly dull Spencer. Believe it or not, this awful and toxic little film was considered an awards season frontrunner upon its release in November. So I was relieved to see Spencer, which paints a completely distorted picture of arguably Britain's most beloved royal other than the Queen, and it paints her as some sort of crazed woman. It was completely snubbed, though, today for this year's BAFTAs. Hallelujah. The shamed flick received 0 nominations when they were announced. There wasn't even a pity nod for Kristen Stewart, once considered the favourite to scoop every Best Actress gong, going for her portrayal of Diana. It's actually the sci-fi epic Dune that leads the nominations for the March 13th ceremony, with 11, followed by Benedict Cumberbatch's tedious western, The Power of the Dog. Honestly, don't watch it. It's horrific. And Kenneth Branagh's Belfast with 6. All 3 are up for Best Picture alongside climate change satire Don't Look Up and coming-of-age story Licorice Pizza. Frankly, for me, this isn't even a competition. We're watching it now. Belfast, one of the best movies I've ever seen. Give it the BAFTA, give it the Oscar, give it everything. And we saw Dame Judi Dench there at 87 years old, delivering one of her best performances of her career. Criminally, she was snubbed by BAFTA today. So those snobs haven't got everything right. Dominique Samuels, Adam Brooks, Amy Nicole. Do stand by, because coming up, my superstar panel will nominate for today's Greatest Britain and Julian Jackass. But first, has COVID officially transformed into the flu? As I'm just trying to convince Amy it has. Dr. Charles Levinson is the man with the answers, having dedicated his life to flu pandemics. I'll grill him in just a few moments. First, though, very quick look at what's coming up in Monday's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, why have scientists been so determined to suppress debate on the Wuhan lab leak theory? Journalist Matt Ridley reveals what he's uncovered in exploring the origins of COVID for his new book. On a landmark day for the Together Declaration against vaccine passports and mandates, the movement's co-founder Alan Miller breaks down the latest developments on the fight to restore freedom in the UK. Plus, GB News star Neil Oliver and positive professor Carol Sikora bring a dash of optimism and reason that you won't find elsewhere in the media. and I break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. The Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, social commentator Esther Kraku, and senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. New figures suggest the milder Omicron variant has brought a crucial change in the deadliness of COVID, as I just mentioned. So this data from the Zoe Symptom Tracker app is fascinating. It shows there were more than 9.2 million UK COVID infections and 10,670 reported deaths since the start of December, which means its infection fatality rate of just over 0.11% over that time period. It reached 15% in May 2020, although that was fueled by minimal testing, let's be honest. But an average flu year's infection fatality rate is estimated to actually be a little bit higher, at 0.12%. So it's likely now that even with millions of COVID cases in December and January, excess winter mortality this year will not even approach a bad flu year. So isn't it time we treated COVID in the same way as its similarly lethal counterpart? This is not to diminish the seriousness of flu, by the way, which can claim nearly 30,000 lives in a bad winter, but we must be able to deal with respiratory viruses without restricting people's freedoms. As the chief executive of Dr. Call Medical Services Group, Dr. Charles Levinson, says in a new article for Mail Plus, there are methods to deal with these respiratory viruses without wrecking the life chances of our children. That sound logic was applied during every winter of my lifetime, with one exception in 2020. I believe we need to regain some of that pragmatism which guided our response through difficult winters before. In those days, society agreed that restrictions on freedom were inappropriate and perhaps ineffective to combat flu. The damage far outweighed any sad deaths that might result from winter waves. And Dr. Levinson has said improving our response to flu pandemics is a personal passion of his. So he's certainly someone worth listening to, and I'm delighted to say he joins me now. Doctor, and the point is here, you as someone who has tackled flu pandemics your entire career, so you're not trying to downplay the seriousness of the flu, you're simply trying to say we don't need all of these draconian restrictions, right?
Well, I think, flu is also quite serious. And in fact, when you compare flu to COVID, you actually get a false picture, and flu is probably worse than it appears because we don't test for it. So we we aren't really aware. So when people go to hospital and die of pneumonia and they have also had flu, it probably isn't picked up. So it is a serious thing, and it is a thing that can cause a pandemic, and we have to be aware that that's a possibility. So I think, we need to start to treat COVID like flu. And I think what we need to do is look back and say, look back at how we've handled the pandemic and say, did we overreact with social distancing and with all the self-isolation?
And do you think we did?
Well, I think with hindsight is a great thing, but I think I absolutely think we did, and in fact, I think I was saying throughout that I felt we did, and what we need to do is look back, not to criticise, because it is. I mean, who would want to be a politician? You have people breathing down your neck. It's very difficult to make decisions, but the reality is that we've had a huge number of excess deaths in the home, non-COVID excess deaths over the pandemic. Macmillan tell us that there are 50,000 cases of cancer that have not been picked up, that would have been picked up in normal times. So people walking around with a cancer which will come to light eventually, and there are all sorts of other things that need to be picked up either through health screening or through people going to the doctor if they have mild symptoms which might be caused by something serious, and so we have a time bomb of problems here of coming after us, and what we need to do is look back, not to criticize, but to say how can we make sure that we if and when there's another pandemic, that we don't launch straight into lockdown. It's terrible. Once you do get into lockdown, it's terribly difficult to get out of it.
Absolutely it is. No, I couldn't agree more. Dr. Charles Levinson, thank you so much. I think he's completely right, by the way. Please, God, no more pandemics. Not in my lifetime anyway. But let's not overreact. Let's not go into that lockdown. And it's great to see the medical professionals of this country studying to say exactly that. Time now, though, to reveal today's Greatest Britain in Union Jackass. Superstar panel is back. Dominique Samuels for the nomination for Greatest Britain tonight.
Mine is Joe Rogan. He's come under a lot of fire recently for misinformation, including by the likes of Harry and Meghan, which I think is just laughable. But I want to support him and nominate him for my Greatest Britain because I think he's great and he's putting the mainstream media to shame.
Adam Brooks, your nomination.
It's the Together Declaration and NHS 100 for their part in ending the NHS mandate.
Woo!
And Amy Nicol, your nominee.
So we touched on him a little bit earlier. It is the infuriatingly talented 11-year-old actor Jude Hill, who stars in Belfast. He was picked out of 3,000 actors to get the part, and he is the youngest ever Oscar nominee for Best Actor.
Oh, I think we've got a little look at him in action, Amy.
Or you could do the project together, you and a young lady. You get the same marks and maybe end up on the same seat together.
But how do you even talk to her?
Oh, my goodness. Amy Nicol, I'm going with you. Jude Hill, what a little bloke. He was so brilliant. And, you know, apparently it was Dame Judi Dench who was teaching him as he went along. I have to say again, go and watch this movie, Belfast, this weekend. It will lift your spirits. Union Jackass time now. Amy Nicol, let me start with you.
So my nominee for Union Jackass is Nadine Dorries for being Nadine Dorries, and definitely the most likely to wheel a suitcase into Co-op and fill it up with wine for her performance on Channel 4 News this week.
You know what? All you lefties are so nasty to Nadine Dorries. This is what happened on Channel 4 News. I don't know why you've got your knickers in such a twist, but have a look.
Shouldn't have said it, should he?
Well, I think there are lots of things that Keir Starmer shouldn't have said.
Well, there are clearly things that he said that aren't true.
The Prime Minister
now, whether they were deliberate lies or not has yet to be established. But he's clearly said things to the House that were not true.
The Prime Minister tells the truth.
You're so mean, Amy Nicol. She's a very loyal woman. Adam.
Stockholm Syndrome.
Adam Brooks, your Union Jackass nominee.
My Jackass is the government's nudge unit, behavioural nudge unit, for weaponising fear and causing a mental health time bomb.
Yeah, very good nominee. And Dominique Samuels, your nominee for Union Jackass.
All of the people that seem to be participating in this orchestrated anti-Joe Rogan attack campaign in order to silence freedom of speech, including Harry and Meghan and people within the White House as well, they're my Union Jackasses because they're trying to stifle information and stifle freedom of speech.
And you know all they're doing, Dominique Samuels, is pushing these folk away from the mainstream media because we can make our own decisions and we can listen to people on Joe Rogan's podcast. We don't have to believe everything they say. We don't have to agree with everything they say. So I think, look, very good nominee, but I'm actually going to go with Adam Brooks because I spoke about this earlier in the show, and I think, Adam, it is about time we start campaigning about what this behavioural insights team, the so-called nudge unit, is starting to do. It was obviously work started by Laura Dodsworth, the brilliant author of A State of Fear, and it's something we need to keep coming back to and keep talking about. Right. But thank you so much to my superstar panel on what has been a very busy news night. Dominique Samuels, Adam Brooks and Amy Nicol. And thank you for your company during a mad old week. I'm back again Monday at 9 o'clock. It's time now for headliners, though. Good night.
Good evening. The weather's on the change. A much colder feel tomorrow. That colder air arriving as wet and windy weather sweeps south overnight. Cold enough for some ice and snow in places also. It's a cold front swinging south across the country overnight, pushing away the mild air that's been with us for a number of days and introducing the much colder conditions out on the wind tomorrow, and it will feel significantly chillier. There's that weather front bringing rain across northern England and Wales overnight, but some snow likely over the hills of northern England and certainly across the hills and mountains of Wales. Following on, there'll be showers, they'll be wintry, and that could turn things icy as temperatures tumble. staying pretty mild across East Anglia and the southeast through the night. But here as well, and across the Midlands, as the wet weather arrives, there could, for a time, be a little bit of snow in places.